Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a Triad production. I'm your host, Dr. Erin Elmore, and today I'm joined by Rob Feiner. Rob is a licensed clinical counselor and has a private practice in Torrance, California. He has 20 years of experience working with adolescents, athletes, and he coaches diverse individuals. In 2018, Rob became a father, and since then, he's combined his years of coaching and mental health with his experience fathering. So his practice focuses on including fathers-to-be and their journey to parenthood. Rob is actually a returning guest, and in our last conversation, Rob did a great job presenting the foundation to the challenges and rewards regarding the transition to fatherhood. I encourage all of our listeners to go back and check that out if you haven't heard it already. But today we're diving deeper. We're going to be interviewing Rob within the context of our Clinicians series. So we're going deeper into the therapist-patient experience. What we want to do in this series is give our listeners an understanding of what occurs within the therapeutic process. So it's a glimpse behind the closed doors of therapy. Rob, welcome. We're happy to have you again.
Oh, thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I guess to start out, give us a brief understanding of the impact of the transition to being a new father. Why is this an area that you like to focus on?
Oh, sure thing. So, little bit of background too is the reason I like to focus on this particular area with my own experience, as I was talking about previously. I was having such a difficult time with it, and that's to put it lightly. And so I was scouring the internet for, hey, is there anything out there with dads? And this is going back only about 3 years ago, and there was like next to nothing. And there wasn't a lot like normalizing what your experience was, like the wide array of emotions and thoughts you're going through. And so once things kind of settled down in our lives, I found it as a natural transition. I would have a lot of first time therapy rookies, I guess you would say, coming in, and a lot of men that were referred to me, otherwise maybe they found me. And a lot of them would come with, okay, I'm either a new dad or my partner is pregnant or we're thinking about adopting and I'm having problems in my relationship. That's usually like the first part. And so it kind of naturally fell into that just through my own experience. But then, knowing that, hey, there's other people who deal with that is really helpful, I think, to both clients and myself. When I started working with folks, it was like, okay, I'm not the only one who's dealing with this.
Absolutely.
We got to figure out a way to do it. So it was more out of like a happenstance, but I do really genuinely enjoy it. It's probably some of my favorite folks to work with.
Yeah. And as you were speaking about, there is a need there. A lot of the theories and the research and the literature focuses a lot on the mother, which is also important, but I'm glad that you're filling in that gap and helping fathers. Just briefly, because we went more in depth on this last time, but briefly, what are some of the challenges that you see your clients come to you with?
Well, it's a couple of different things. And I think the big one is just the huge life transition. And I think culturally, a lot of men there's like a somewhat state of denial of like what is actually going to happen when you have this baby, because it's almost like a binary thinking. There's the people who go, oh, it's such a blessing. And then there's the people who say, your life is over. And there's nothing in between. And I think one of the biggest challenges is what they're bringing to the table versus what reality is, if it's on either one of those spectrums. Because to be honest, a lot of the time it's either the denial of what's going on, or like one of those two, the oh, my life is over, or everything's going to be incredible and easy and I'll just be able to work full time. And again, kind of going to the denial part. And so we help to gently, I think that's one of the big things, is being gentle about it. It is a process to help them get in touch with the reality of what's going on.
Yeah. So you really help set expectations that guide them through the transition of not this black and white thinking, but something more in the middle of this is going to be a blessing and also really difficult at the same time.
Most definitely.
It's good. Well, help us understand. We'll start at the beginning and kind of go through the middle of therapy and then how you wrap up. So at the beginning, help us understand how you welcome your clients into the therapy process. Do you have a formal assessment? How do you figure out where you want to start with your clients?
Sure. So when I first started as a therapist, I was using all the formal assessments. I still do occasionally, but most of the time when people come in the door, I try to keep it as personable as possible. It's a fine line where you're trying to normalize everything. And I had a really wonderful supervisor, one of my supervisors, and she kind of quoted it as saying, you bring a bit of masculine energy in the room, but it's not toxic. You're like a dude that does therapy.
Yeah.
And I've tried to roll with that as a theme when they come in, and I'll say, hey, you're coming to me with an issue. And we were talking about physical therapy earlier, and I got a lot of influence on physical therapy where I'll even explain it in physical terms, because a lot of guys, they've been to physical therapy, but not any kind of counseling. So say if you came in to me and I was a physical therapist, you hurt your knee, we're going to see your range of motion. We're going to see how you walk. We're going to address your knee. There might be other stuff going on, but we're going to address the knee, just like they're coming into me for a particular issue. Let's address that. We'll figure out how long it's been going on, symptom frequency, duration, intensity, all that good stuff. But I just don't put it in those terms right off the bat.
Right. It's a great analogy though. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we address the issue as you're coming in, what's going on in the present, take a look at your symptoms. And in essence, I tell them, I say, listen, you're the conversation captain. You steer this ship where you want it to go. And I'm like the first mate. I'm going to ask some questions along the line, ask for some clarification. But really, I tell them, the better I get to know you, the more I can help.
Right.
But sometimes I'll appear a little passive in the beginning, but it'll get more active. Like, you're going to have a teammate in this. And that's the biggest thing that I think helps them, is knowing, hey, what I'm dealing with, we can work with that.
Yes. I love that approach. And I feel like that's very normalizing, right? Of, we all have bodies that break down in different ways, and we all have mental health that breaks down in different ways. And so to just normalize that and say, hey, we're going to work on what it is you want to work on. I think that's a wonderful way to normalize their coming in and their concerns.
Yeah. And I tend to check in too, as we go through that first session as well, how you feeling, where you're at. Cause some people word vomit and then they feel super vulnerable.
Right.
And I've had men that said, like, I think I'm going to throw up. And I said, hey, if you got to go throw up, that's okay. It's understandable.
I've heard that referred to as a vulnerability hangover, where the next day you're just like, what have I done? You get very awkward. Yeah.
Yeah. We talk a little bit about that towards the end of the first session too. So you might be feeling a little raw next few days. Just put it like physical therapy. It's like, I went to go see my physical therapist the other day. My back is sore today. I know it's not forever, but
it's a good sore. It needs to be sore. Right.
Yeah.
It's great. You explain that and set the expectations. Yeah, that's great. Do you have a particular therapeutic approach that you use, or even just a way that you conceptualize how you're thinking about your clients?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, when I mentioned one supervisor, that was one of she was a psychiatrist. And then my other supervisor was a cognitive therapist.
Okay.
And he was based mostly in mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I found that as an intro, like a user-friendly version to help people get acquainted with therapy, and for me, using that cognitive model is helpful off the bat. Just because there's so many, when we talk about like coaching, it's almost like a style of martial arts, when it's like addressing like boxing, like you're throwing a jab or a cross. It's like you have your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors, and it's an easy intro to therapy. And so I generally take that more of a mindfulness cognitive approach off the bat to conceptualize. But as we do that, for me, I won't talk about this initially, but I'll ask a little bit of family boarding stuff too,
Mhm.
because the attachment theory is combined with that cognitive theory where it's saying like, here's where I got it from, is really empowering too. Just
Right.
just to know that. So it's always floating around. Later in therapy, I usually get more into attachment,
Yeah.
but
Those
that's
are good.
always up in the
Good
air.
combination. I use a lot of that combination too, because
Mhm.
CBT addresses the practical concerns right away. But it's like physical therapy. You want to know, well, how did I tweak my knee? Like, is it the way I'm
Mhm.
standing? Is it the way I'm walking? And so I think of the attachment part as looking deeper at how can you maintain these changes that we just made by understanding where they came
Mhm.
from and how to catch
Yeah.
them in the future. So that's a really good combination you've got.
Sure. Just to add on the last part, because usually, especially with fatherhood, most of the time they're still with their partner, or they're at least having to remain civil with their partner to have some semblance of order, I guess you would say. And that's what I use to conceptualize a lot of Sue Johnson's emotion focused couples therapy.
She's great.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, just with the attachment stuff, just understanding like their dynamic, like how they speak to each other, and
Mhm.
using like her demon dialogues, how that manifests. It's just my ability, or I think any clinician's ability to help you categorize. Nobody likes being put in a box, but at least it gives you some way of saying, okay, this is how I would treat this.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you help with the thoughts, changing the expectations, changing the cognitions around what's
Yeah.
going on, and then look
Hmm.
deeper at where did this come from to equip them to move forward. But yeah, I love that
Definitely.
you're bringing in that couple piece because, as you were mentioning, a lot of the clients that come in for you, it's because of relational concerns. So EFT is really
Absolutely.
great at addressing that. Are there any other
Yeah.
strategies? I mean, those are wonderful. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
we get a thorough perspective. Are there any other
Sure.
strategies that we haven't talked about that you use?
Yeah, so the other part of that is usually the bottom up approach, because that mind body connection, but really the beginning with, I got a little bit of acquaintance with Pat Ogden sensory motor psychotherapy, and
Okay.
just how she would have her clients start to try motor responses to stress.
Interesting.
And so
Yeah.
when I have clients do like a DTR, which is usually the first thing I assign after the first session, I'll say, you know, what are your thoughts on homework? Here's a model for a DTR, and I want you to include your physiological responses. I want
Okay,
you to
and just
start
for our
getting tuned.
listeners,
Yeah.
clarify what a DTR is for our listeners.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I always say this to my clients. I say it's a real fancy term called disruptive thought record.
Oh, okay,
But
okay.
I say, let's just put it as like when you have a thought, when you're feeling off, and we're not going to play whack a mole with this. And I said this even this morning to a client. I said, you know, when you're feeling off, like when you are sitting there across from your spouse and you're like, they're just so annoying. I want you to not lash out. Instead of lashing out, let's pull this sheet out. You can throw me under the bus. Like tell them your therapist told you to do it. You pull out the piece of paper and then you write down like time, date, thought, exactly verbatim what your emotion. We talk about what emotions are, how one, they're always valid. Two, they're one word answers. And then we go into like, what are you physiologically feeling? Like, you're hot,
Mhm.
cold? Do you feel tension, shoulders, face? What is it? And rate it if you want to on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, how intense is this?
Mhm.
And that's the part that's helpful, I think, with giving them some hope. Like, oh, okay, like I don't just have to stay trapped in this stress I'm in. I have something I can do now.
Yeah, the
Um,
tools are really
mhm,
empowering. Yes, because nobody wants to
yeah,
feel that way. Nobody wants to lash out at their person. So it sounds
yeah,
like you're equipping them with actual tools they can use to figure out what am I feeling, what's going on. And the
mhm,
body never lies. The body is often our first clue that something is
yep,
off. Yeah.
mhm, yeah. So that's that bottom up approach. We're including it all because it's all connected, and
Yeah.
that's a lot of the time I end up sending a lot of my clients to my physical therapist buddy, because if they're dealing with anxiety or distress, most likely to deal with physical pain too. So it's
Absolutely.
always a
They're
nice
connected.
referral. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very
Mhm.
true. That's great. I'm
Mhm.
wondering, what are some examples of the most common cognitive distortions that you notice in these young fathers?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So black and white thinking is a big one. All or nothing. It's either terrible or it's
I'm
great
either
or
failing as a father or I'm killing it.
yeah,
Yeah.
or like it's always going to be like this, like your fortune telling, like my
We'll
life
never,
is
never sleep
forever.
again.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of fortune telling, a lot of overgeneralization is a big one too. Like and over the top exaggeration of what's going on, and sometimes minimization too. Like they'll say like, oh, it's fine, it's fine. My wife told me I had to come in.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and it's because they shut down. Like they're always emotionally shut off.
Right.
Yeah, they do like the stiff arm to everything. Like if there's distress, they just leave. They can't even handle it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So
So
whichever angle they're coming from, you're really working to bring them into a softer, more realistic perspective
yeah,
place. Yeah. Do you find
absolutely.
that fatherhood pulls up deep core beliefs? Do you see common core beliefs from these fathers you're struggling with? Like, I don't know,
Yes.
appreciation or failure or anything like
Mhm.
that?
Absolutely. The deeper core beliefs tend to come out only because I have a colleague I meet with through peer consultation every week. She said this is not mine, but she gave me a quote of saying like when you're stressed, you regress.
Mm-hmm.
And those deep wounded core beliefs, those negative core beliefs, they come out to roost. If
Mm-hmm.
you're running on 3 to 4 hours of sleep, and then the other part is you mix in both of your families of origin
At the same time,
at the same
helping
time.
so much.
Right. I could sense the sarcasm there. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're sometimes they do help, but a lot of the times it doesn't feel that way
Or even
at
in
all.
the in good intention, it can, as you were
Yeah.
mentioning, there's just different dynamics and different communication patterns. So having to
Yeah.
navigate all that when you're sleep deprived can be quite a bit.
Oh, absolutely. And so
Yeah.
that's a big thing that those negative core beliefs come out. I see the more distress, the less they're able to recognize them as just, real core wounds rather
Right.
than, what's actually going on right now.
So that's where the DTR can help as well, because it just looks like
Definitely.
it slows down, take a snapshot of what's going on, and then you can
Hmm.
communicate. That's great.
Yeah.
Is there an app that does that? Do they have to pull out a piece of paper? We should make an
We,
app for that.
we should make it. I bet you there is one. I tend to give them like a Word document that they can open up on their phone. It just looks like, or an
Oh,
Excel
that's,
document,
yeah,
and it
that's kind
just
of the
looks
same.
like a spreadsheet, and they
I
can
bet you could
just,
even do it with your notes app. Just, go
yeah.
to the bathroom for a minute and be like, what's going on here? And
Oh,
just
I use
journal.
that.
Yeah.
I did that. I did that on a plane a couple weeks ago.
You could do it
Uh,
anywhere.
yeah, yeah. I was sitting with my son screaming in my lap, and I definitely did the DTR on the plane because I needed
Awesome.
to. Yeah,
Yeah, it can strike at any time. I want to go back to the couples work because I feel like that's an
sure.
interesting angle we haven't explored as much. So, you already mentioned you use EFT with couples. Or do you have any other strategies that you notice are helpful or any other framework that you kind of shift to when you're working with the
Oh,
couple unit?
actually, it's a good clarification. I don't work with couples anymore. I use EFT and also a lot of Gottman principles for actually the individual to
Oh, I see what
get
you're
some,
saying. I
yeah,
thought
to
you meant
get
you
some.
bring in the partner and then do a couple sessions.
Usually not with the new dads. Their spouse is usually, you contain this. That's what they're saying to my client. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to devote any more time to you right now. Is a
Okay.
lot of the time when I hear, and that's fine. Like that's the way it should be. It needs to be because when you're a dad, you're the able-bodied in the house. Your spouse, if they just went through childbirth, they've went through a traumatic experience. Now they're not sleeping, and they are, if they're breastfeeding, they're keeping another creature alive.
It's not a
Um,
great situation to add couples therapy onto it at the moment. That
yeah,
makes
so that
sense. Okay.
yeah, so I tend to say like, hey, I got some couples therapists, really awesome ones that I work with that I love and I really appreciate their work. And they're going to align with a lot of what we'll talk about, like the language
Mm-hmm.
you'll hear it in couples therapy. You'll have a head start when you
Mm-hmm.
go in there. You'll know what a demon dialogue is. You'll know, the four horsemen of the apocalypse for Gottman. Like you're gonna
Yeah.
know that stuff. you'll feel a little more equipped going in there.
Got it. So it's more
Yeah.
focused on the individual, so a bit more psychoeducation about how to communicate with the partner on their end and what's going on. That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
How to emotionally engage.
Right.
That's the big one. The dads, I don't mean to generalize, but and I'll be frank, like dudes were just brought up trying to fix, and no emotional engagement. And learning how to emotionally engage, and we do that in therapy sessions on how to do that. That helps. I've seen it help, especially with once their kids get older, how to emotionally engage with them, how to not have to fix their problems, just be there.
Yeah, just listen.
Yeah, listen, and it's like, what do you need right now? How can I support you right now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, those are great tools. That makes sense.
So that's where those theoretical approaches come in.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Are you preparing for a licensure exam in psychology, social work, marriage and family therapy, counseling, or behavioral analysis? AATBS is here to help. We have been supporting behavioral and mental health students to prepare for their licensure exams for more than 45 years, working with over 1 million students to succeed on test day and move on to the next step in their career. With products ranging from comprehensive courses to quiz banks and delivered live online, self-study online, and in print, AATBS has test prep solutions that meet every student's needs and learning styles. Visit us today at aatbs.com. That's aatbs.com. And use promo code BHT15 to save 15% off your next purchase.
So, how do you know when your client is ready to graduate? How do you know when the goals have been met?
Good question. Yeah, because some folks, like, they don't know. And so when I start to sense it when we start running out of things to talk about.
Okay.
There's less and less to talk about, less and less conflict coming up between them and their spouse. And we do periodic check-ins, like how you're feeling about therapy, like where are you at in your process? I'll come right out and ask them. And so once we do that, we start looking at, okay, you know what? If you are feeling a little better, how would you feel going down to bi-weekly? And some folks say like, okay, yeah. Most say, yeah, let's try it. I say, if you need me in between, just call. Don't feel like you have to wait 2 weeks. We'll figure out a time to squeeze you in. But as therapy starts to wind down, we go to bi-weekly. We'll continue to revisit, like, where do you think you're at in the process? Like, as far as your goals go, like, do you think you've accomplished them? And what I reassure them too is that, hey, like, I give you the tools and we work together to get you the tools so you can work on a lot of this stuff on your own. But as we were talking about physical therapy earlier, like I was talking about my back and my own physical therapist, I have a lot of tools when it comes to working with my back because I've had issues over the years. And I went in to see him and he goes, you threw the kitchen sink at your back. And now you're coming to see me. And no, the kitchen sink was good. He was like, no, that is good. And I take the same approach. Like, you're throwing all your cognitive tools at the problem. Like, let's say we've terminated. You threw all your cognitive tools at the problem. You're still running into an issue. Then you come to see the guy who got, or woman who got the degree in it.
Right.
You know,
right.
That's what we do for a living. We're here to help you.
Yeah.
And so that's how I kind of treat it towards the end. I say, hey, if you use all the tools and nothing's working, give me a call.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good framework because we do that all the time, right? You get a cold, it's like, okay, maybe I'll be fine, but it turns into something else. Then you go get some help. So same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's funny. I think of ending therapy as the opposite of learning to ride a bike because normally you start slow and you have training wheels and then you just go faster. But with therapy, you go in, guns a-blazing, let's get started once a week, sometimes twice a week. And then it's the opposite as you make progress, people can come less frequently and kind of try out, how do I feel with less support? Do I feel okay with this? And then kind of wrap up when they feel empowered to be okay on their own. Yeah, that's great.
Definitely.
Do you have any rituals or routines around ending therapy, like maybe something you do special for the last session? Some people don't, but I just wondered if you had any unique way that you like to end with your clients.
What's interesting, I haven't thought about it too much, but ultimately, like what we were talking about earlier with briefing them on like a lot of relapse prevention and
Yes.
reminders, a lot of confidence building.
Yeah.
And like, let's take a look at like where you were, where you're at now, and just know it's a resource that's there for you. And that's a lot of the way we start to end the process. Unless they're moving out of state, then we look to they'll say, okay, well, if I do need someone out of state, what would I look for? And I say, here's what you look for when you're looking on, let's say, good therapy.
Right.
These are the check boxes you would look for that would do something if you're wanting a similar approach to what we've done.
Right. Right.
And so we kind of arm the client with the skills to not only prevent relapse, but then also like if they can't come see you, how to look again for someone else. Because I tend to be towards the middle and end of therapy, I'm really transparent about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And what we're doing in there. I'll use the jargon. It's fine. Like I said, listen, I'm going to read you a script straight from a book right now. Here's the book.
Right. Right.
Because I think it's actually extremely helpful for them to see a little bit behind the curtain too at times.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be this big mystery. You can explain what you're thinking and why this intervention works. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've noticed that too, because like when you go to a medical doctor, that's what they do. They say, okay, according to our research, this is the right medication for you, or according to our research, this is why this will work. But sometimes there's this mystery aura around therapy. Not all therapists share the conceptualization behind what they're doing. So I bet your clients appreciate that because it's empowering. It's sort of more of a partnership in that way.
Definitely. Yeah. It's like we're figuring it out together. Yeah, it's almost that like athletic coach mentality where when I used to work with the MMA fighters, this was way, way back. I really wasn't someone who would teach you from scratch what to do. I was a person you came to see for a specific reason, like, oh, you needed help doing this.
Right.
And so I don't need to teach you how to punch. You've been doing that for years. And so that idea of just expanding on your skills is really helpful. And I think it builds confidence in the clients too. It's like, hey, I'm going to look something up because I'm seeing this coming up.
Right. Right.
And yeah, I've almost found that helpful, even like you said, going to a medical doctor when they go on the computer and they look up like which antibiotic or allergy thing they have to give you. And they're like, well, here's the evidence. This is what UCLA research says. Okay, perfect. Sounds good.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know you used to work with M&A fighters. I feel like we might need to do a spin-off podcast just on that interesting topic. But
this was a long time ago. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
I used to compete about 20 years ago. This is like before it blew up. Like right about when it blew up, to be honest.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to bring it back to our topic today,
sure.
I did like how you mentioned that you kind of plant the seed that people can come back to therapy, because I think I just want to emphasize for our listeners who maybe aren't in the field that it's actually very normal for people to pop in and pop out of therapy throughout their lifespan. You know, there's seasons of life where things are going okay and they got all the tools they need. And then there's definitely seasons where life kind of hits you over the head and you don't know what's going on, or you just need a checkup or something. So I like that you explain to your clients, okay, here's how you could find somebody if I wasn't available or you moved. I think that's really empowering too. Yeah,
definitely.
Well, is there any kind of catch-all general advice that you would want to leave with anyone who might be a father to be soon or struggling with fatherhood? What kind of hope would you give our listeners if they're in that situation?
Well, I would say it's like, seek the support. I mean, the hope is that you're not going to be alone in this, but you will be if you choose to be. There's plenty of therapists out there. I'm not the only one. But if you don't have access to a therapist or it's not your game, the big one is seek support from other people you can trust. There's a really funny SNL skit that popped up. It was a client who recommended I watch it. And then I actually shared it with a few different clients. It was called Man Park.
Okay.
I don't know if I would say
I haven't seen that one.
Google it after you're done.
Okay.
And it's about men in relationships that don't have friends. And so they bombard their partner with it. And it's very funny. But it also popped up on a few different therapists' Facebook groups. And they said, this is really funny, but also a serious issue. Talk to other dads. Make sure that the dads you're talking to are like-minded with you, not the ones that are going to tell you, oh, your life is over, or wait till it happens to you. And also not on the other end, like every day is a blessing. Like, don't go with that dad either.
That's a dad's going to break down one day. Yeah.
Yeah. I have two, I would say like 3 dad friends that I talk with regularly through text. And I mean, our text message, I mean, they're hilarious. It's just because we can vent to each other. And just, I mean, I'll show them to my wife sometimes. She'll start laughing and say, oh man, I'm so sorry. But just having that support is a big deal, to know you're not in it alone and isolated with this stuff. Because I think that's where a lot of fathers, no matter what, they get really isolated with it and they won't talk to anybody about it. They think they just have to handle it. No, you do not have to just handle it alone.
Right.
You can't. You need your wiring is necessitating people around you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it takes so much courage. Just the reaching out might be the hardest part. But once you reach out, then the hardest part's over and you've got that support. And I love that you're encouraging that, because it can be so isolating. And especially I think in our culture, at least, men are not taught or trained to share their emotions very much or reach out very much. And so it can feel very risky. But if not, then when would you need help? It's a good time to do it. So I'm glad you're encouraging them to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one, because once you're doing that, at least and this is the big one, you're taking a lot of it off of your partner's plate. And that's a lifelong thing that would need to happen to sustain your relationship. They can't take on everything that you have, especially in this day and age with COVID and you're working from home, you're not in the office. I'm in that boat too. Like, I have to get out of the house to seek talking with other people, or my wife will know. And, she'll say, you didn't talk to anybody today, did you? So, I recommend it, especially fathers, to be support.
Yeah. And that I like how you mentioned that could be friends. It could be reaching out to a therapist. It could be community or church group or something. It could be in any way. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. Just making sure that this is the big one. And I talk about this with finding friends or finding a partner. Your personalities need to mesh. You don't have to be into the same stuff. It's just your personalities want to be a good match.
It's good. Yeah. Well, we're coming towards the end of our time today. Rob, can you tell our listeners a little bit more about your private practice and your website and where they can learn more about you?
Sure thing. So my website, people can easily access that. It's just my name. It's robfeiner.com. So ROBFEINER.com. I don't have really much of a social media presence. I know I have a Facebook page, but there's not much on there because I'm not very good at it, self-admittedly. With my website, there'll be some resources on there where in the workshops and appearances where I have some notes from certain workshops I've done. This podcast is actually linked there. A couple other podcasts that I was on are on there, along with links actually in there too to certain physical therapy endorsements that I have as far as who I would recommend to go see. There's a bunch on there, and then also a bit about me, my background, just so you can get better acquainted, see if it might be a good match for you.
And last time we spoke, you mentioned some really good books. Do you have any book recommendations for fathers? Anything that you would recommend during this phase of life?
I got them right over there. So I was recommend first, I guess in the order of things, Pacify Me is really good by Chris Mancini. Really good intro to fatherhood. And these books, I always say, don't feel like you have to consume it all at once. It's a process.
Little bits at a time.
Yeah, because it's going to take 9 months for a pregnancy. He's going into child rearing. So that's a really good one, an intro one. I really like How to Not Hate Your Husband After Having Kids by Jancy Dunn. And that's when you want to like make sure either you're reading with a spouse or you're reading with like a therapist and you're referencing it. I really love that book. At the same time, it can freak a lot of people out, but it's not like the everyday. It's just kind of giving you some insight.
For worst case scenario, how to be prepared.
Yeah, how to talk about stuff and what to expect to realistically ground yourself in being bad, I think. And also to see the world through your partner's eyes. And then the last one is Hold Me Tight. I always love Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson.
She's great. Yeah, I love anything by her.
Awesome.
That's good. That's great. Well, thanks for sharing all that. I feel like I have a good sense now of how, if I were a client, how it would go in your practice. So thanks for sharing all of that. I know that you're impacting so many families, by working with the dad. So thank you for the good work that you do.
And thanks for having me on.
Of course, we're happy to have you back. I really appreciate you being here with us today again. And I want to remind our listeners that this episode, its resources, and all of our other shows can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. You can visit triadhq.com/BHT today and explore the archive. And finally, we want to thank you, our listeners, for joining in on the conversation. We appreciate you being here with us and look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Tribe Network, all rights reserved.